Here are 9 true stories of kids who stared death in the face, took charge, and thanks to their heroism kept their families alive. Number 9. Jayden, Cameron, and Rachael Moore. On the night of April the 11th, 2014, Rachael Moore saw her ex-partner's car pull into the driveway of her Queensland home in Australia. After 7 years of dealing with his alcoholism and abuse, she finally broke up with him. So when she saw him getting out of his car and heading for the house, she knew he was there with bad intentions. Fearing the worst, she told her 5 children to go and hide. Daryl Fields then burst into the home wielding a shotgun. He grabbed Rachael by the throat and shot her in the arm. Rachael fell to the ground as Daryl reloaded to finish her off. The children sprang from their hiding space. They managed to wrestle the gun away from him and hide it out back. Daryl continued to attack Rachael, trying to gouge her eyes out when the boys returned and pulled him off her. 12-year-old Cameron elbowed him in the temple while 14-year-old Jayden put him in a chokehold. As they held him off, 10-year-old Kaylea helped her mum out of the house and called the police. Daryl was arrested and charged with attempted murder, breaching a domestic violence order, and unlawful possession of a firearm. He pled guilty to 4 charges and is awaiting sentencing. Rachael almost lost her arm but pleaded with doctors to save it. 15 operations later, she still hasn't regained full control of her arm but is undergoing rehabilitation and will likely have to have a bicep transplant. Number 8. Angelica Riggins. Fire safety assemblies are not a great way to kill class time, but they may come in handy when you least expect it, and that is exactly what happened in this next story. Tulsa, Oklahoma, Kenneth Riggins is awakened by the sound of their dogs barking. Upon getting up, he smells fire. He followed the scent to a small room at the back of the house and opened the door. He's met with the backdraft of a raging fire. He quickly slams the door shut and runs to wake up his 5-year-old daughter, Angelica. Angelica had recently attended a fire safety demonstration led by Sparkles, the fire safety dog at school, and knew exactly what to do. She got on her hands and knees and crawled under the smoke. I was really scared, but I moved as fast as I could, she explained. After getting out of the house, she ran to the neighbor's house and called 911. When the fire department arrived, she told them that her dad was still inside the burning house. After her dad had told her to get out, he re-entered the house to search for a friend's child who was staying with them. But in all the confusion and smoke, he forgot that her mum had picked her up earlier. The firefighters found him unconscious on the living room floor. He spent the next week in the hospital, but had it not been for his brave daughter, he would have ended up dead. Number 7. CICALESE. One night, KAITLYN tucked her 5-year-old son into bed and went to take a shower. After getting into the shower, she suffered a seizure and hit her head. Her son Sal heard her fall and went to investigate. He found her laying on the shower floor in a pool of blood. Sal collected his 2-month-old sister and carried her out to the couch. Using a step stool, he opened the garage door, returned for his sister, then ran for the neighbor's house. When the neighbor answered the door, he told them what had happened. The neighbor called 911 and went next door to check on KAITLYN. KAITLYN recovered, but if it hadn't been for the bravery of her young son, she would have been dead. The Rural Metro Fire Department awarded Sal with an honorary firefighter award, a shirt, certificate, and first aid kit. Number 6. Roman. We tend to think that kids these days are too addicted to their electronics, but in this case, having prior knowledge of a smartphone saved a woman's life. When Roman, a 4-year-old from Croydon, UK, found his mother unconscious on the floor, unable to breathe, he realized something was wrong and that he needed to do something immediately. So he did what any child growing up in the age of cell phones would do: ask Siri. Roman grabbed his mum's iPhone and tried to call for help, but the phone was locked. Having used her iPhone before to play games, he knew exactly how to unlock it. He grabbed his mum's hand and pressed her thumb on the home button. He then used Siri to call 999, the UK's emergency number. After getting the dispatcher to understand that his mum was in trouble, paramedics arrived and began administering first aid. His mum regained consciousness before being sent to the hospital. Later, Apple's CEO Tim Cook posted the news on Twitter congratulating the boy on his heroism. Number 5. Trigon. When you have a serious heart condition, make sure there is always someone around you. In this next story, that person just happened to be a 5-year-old boy. When Jayden got off the phone with her husband, she felt her heart racing. She tried a deep breathing technique that usually eases her heart rhythm disorder, but today it didn't work. Being 6 months pregnant and alone with her 5-year-old and 15-month-old sons, she knew that she needed help, so she called her parents. When no one answered, she resorted to 911. That's when everything went black. Trigon, the 5-year-old, picked up the phone with the dispatcher still on the line and told her that his mum had died. Because he was taught to be wary of strangers, Trigon used the aliases Peter Parker and Spider-Man instead of his real name. The emergency operator sent an ambulance to the address listed, but since the family had recently moved a few doors down, the paramedics went to the wrong house. It wasn't until Trigon flashed the porch lights on and off that they finally located the house. While all this was going on, Lincoln, the 15-month-old son, wandered outside and into a neighbor's yard, giving the paramedics another scare. He was later found playing with a puppy. When Jayden awoke in the ambulance, paramedics told her that her brave son had saved her life. To this day, Jayden calls Trigon her little superhero. Number 4. J.T. Parker. In July of 2016, Stephen Parker and his 2 sons, JT and Mason, were working on their car in their backyard. They were taking the engine out of a Toyota Prius and had it jacked up in the air. That's when Stephen climbed underneath to remove the axles. Mason cut himself and went back inside the house to treat his wound, but Stephen continued removing the axles. It was at this moment that the car shifted and fell on top of him, pinning him to the ground. He called for his other son JT to help lift the car up, but only weighing in at 50 pounds, he didn't think the boy could manage. JT began jumping up and down on the jack. The car began to slowly lift up off his father. Parker was airlifted to the hospital and only suffered 6 broken ribs on his left side and 7 on his right. When asked where he thinks he got the strength, JT responded, "Angels." Number 3. Kane O'Connor. Each year, there are over 300,000 house fires in the US, causing over $7 billion in damage, which is why it's important for every family to go over fire safety and escape procedures. That came in handy for the parents of Kane O'Connor. 8-year-old Kane O'Connor was deep asleep when he was awoken by the smell of smoke and the heat of flames. "I couldn't breathe and I felt the fire hitting my head." He ran into his parents' room, woke them up and told them the house was on fire. The family managed to escape unharmed. The cause of the fire was ruled an accident and blamed on a space heater in Kane's bedroom. The family is staying with other family members and have set up a GoFundMe page to try and replace the things they lost in the fire. Kane, who is autistic, said that when he saw the fire, he instinctively knew what to do. He was honored as a hero at his school. Number 2. Joe Ellingworth. While listening to his health class teacher instruct them on CPR, Joe Ellingworth thought about zoning out, but he decided he'd better pay attention. This moment came in handy when his father, John, suffered a heart attack in their home. Joe called 911 and the operator tried to instruct his mum, Marissa, on how to perform CPR on her husband. But in the face of an emergency, she froze. Luckily, Joe remembered what they taught him in class. He told his mum she can do it and instructed her in exactly what to do. When John woke up in the hospital, he had no memory of what had happened and miraculously had no brain damage from lack of oxygen to the brain. Number 1. Maddie Wheeler. While on vacation at Busch Gardens, Brandie Wheeler and her 2 daughters Maddie and Millie spotted a car accident on the road in front of them. Paul Salzman, the man responsible for the accident, fled his vehicle and went toward the Wheeler family van in an attempted hit and run. Brandie was on the phone with 911 when she saw Salzman approaching her van. She watched in helpless horror as Salzman reached through the window, unlocked the door, and climbed inside. Maddie began furiously punching the man and screaming for help. She managed to put the car in drive and continued beating the man as she was extremely concerned with her and her sister's safety. During the fight, Maddie received a fractured wrist, but her family couldn't be prouder of her heroism. Police eventually showed up and arrested SALSMAN, charging him with 3 counts of carjacking.
Hola, guerreras y guerreros. Aquí estoy en las calles.
He is one of the few remaining members of the Medellin cartel, surrendered himself to the justice system, and he was released in August of 2014. We're gonna have him take us around to the different spots around Medellin.